This is Exodus chapter 22, part 1. And one of the things that I made a mistake on in Exodus 21, actually the biggest mistake I made, was presuming that you guys understood what I was talking about. I cannot tell you how many nasty little comments I got. And I'm sitting here going, you guys just don't get it, do you? So, I'm going to try this time to help you get it. The people being described in Exodus 22 are literally the scum of the earth. And 21 was the same way. Let me tell you something. When you spend so much of your money that you get to such a level of destitution, okay, this is being destitute here, that you have to sell your children into slavery because of all the bills you piled up. And we're not talking about like doctor bills for the kids or school supplies for the kids. We're not talking about stuff like that. We're talking about when you go out there and you're buying bottles of booze because, oh, you can't handle your work. Or you're standing there gambling all your money away or something like that. Buying frivolous stuff, trying to show off to the neighbors to the point where you end up in the hole. Financially, you end up in a big hole. Oh, I got all the nice stuff. Of course, I got this great big debt to go along with it. When you get your bills so bad that you have to sell your children into slavery to pay all those bills off, that makes you the scum of the earth. Even the worst sinner would recognize that. That's what was being talked about in Exodus chapter 21. Sometimes when a kid was sold into slavery for 7 years, he found a better life than what he had back at home, and he didn't want to go back home. So what did he do? He stayed with the slave owner. Why hang around with your scummy parents when you can hang around with people that actually care about what happens to you? Okay? So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about these were scummy people. And I'm going to prove this again in Exodus chapter 22. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Now let me tell you the function of sheep back at that time. Sheep produced wool. Wool was a vital component to a lot of garments made at that time. So, if a guy stole a family sheep, okay, let's say that you have person A and he goes onto person B's land and steals one of their sheep, that meant that they couldn't make clothes for themselves or for their kids. Talk about a scum bucket. But it gets worse, because the first fruits, okay, the firstborn sheep were usually used in sacrifices at the temple. You stole that, they couldn't have anything to sacrifice in the temple. Talk about the scum of the earth. You've stolen their sacrifice to God. That made you a scum of the earth. That's why it was 4 sheep for a sheep. Now what about oxen? That was worse. Oxen were used to help plow the land so that people could plant their crops. What would happen is if person A went to person B's property and stole person B's ox, that would pretty much guarantee that person B and his family would starve. Some of them would actually starve to death. That's a scum bucket. You see what I mean? That's why they said, if he steals just one of your oxen, person A has to refund you 5 oxen for the one he stole. Now the thing is, when we're talking about refunding them, he couldn't just bring the oxen back. Okay, because usually the reason why he stole the oxen in the first place was either to satisfy his own tummy. He would actually butcher the oxen or the sheep and he'd have himself a nice meal. Think about that. He's having a nice meal while those people are starving to death. He's having a nice meal while those people have to go without clothes. You talk about a scum bucket. Or worse, he takes what he has stolen and puts it in the marketplace and makes a fortune. So he's making money off of their lack of clothes, or he's making money while they're starving to death. Okay? So while person A is making a profit, person B is either starving to death or has no clothing. Or worse yet, has nothing to sacrifice in the temple. That's why God said what he did. You see how scummy a person can actually get? If a thief is found breaking in, okay, now, the thief is trespassing. He's trying to steal from you. He possibly has a weapon that he could use to threaten your life and the life of your family. It's the middle of the night. He has no business being there. And he is struck so he dies. Okay? Because now this thief has woken up the family, and of course the father of the family is doing his job in defending his family from an intruder. Then there shall be no guilt for the bloodshed of the thief. In other words, if that thief breaks in and you get yourself an armament, you find the guy and you kill him on the spot, you don't go to jail and you don't face murder charges for killing that thief. That thief had no business being there in the first place. That's the way God sees it. However, let's say the thief broke into your house, you didn't hear him, nobody heard him, and he successfully took what he was going to take. And he went back to his house. Okay? So the thief is going to be person A. Person A goes into person B's house, steals a bunch of stuff, and goes back to his own house. Now person B wakes up the next morning, realizes all this stuff is gone, and then figures out who stole that merchandise. Well then, if person B goes to person A's house and then kills him, then person B is facing murder charges. Okay? And that says it right here. If the sun has risen on him, meaning the thief, there shall be guilt for his bloodshed. Okay? You can have the thief arrested for his thievery, but you can't just go out and kill him whenever you darn well please. If you didn't nail him when he broke into your house, then, well, you'll just have to settle it in court. Okay? However, he, meaning the thief, should make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. What does that mean? If the thief has enough to give you back what was stolen from you, it goes back. If the thief is totally destitute, the thief is thrown into slavery. Instantly. And in some cases, that kind of slavery could be the equivalent of death. It was really a life and death situation at that time. If you were thrown into slavery as a thief, well, odds are things were not going to look too good for you. If what is stolen, which is if the theft, if whatever has been stolen, is found alive and in his hand, in the hands of the thief, whether it is an oxen, a donkey, or a sheep. Now, donkeys were used for transportation. If a thief stole your donkey, you weren't going anywhere. And that could be a bad thing because sometimes you had to take your crops to market. You had such a good crop that you couldn't eat it all, so you took some of it to the market to sell for profit. So that thief, by stealing your donkey, also stole your means of taking your crops or whatever else you had to the market to sell for a profit. It's literally destroying your business. Okay, so let's go through this again. If the theft, what has been stolen, is certainly found alive and in his hand, whether it is an ox, which would mean something that helps you plant things in the ground, a donkey, which helps you get around in places, or a sheep. Remember, sheep for clothes, sheep for animal sacrifices. The thief shall restore double. If he steals 1 sheep from you, he has to give you back 2 sheep. If he steals 1 oxen from you, he has to give you back the oxen that he stole. He has to then give you 1 of his oxen too. And the same thing goes for a donkey. He not has to give you back your donkey, but he has to give you his own as well. And that can be pretty bad for the thief. Okay. The next scripture deals with a guy that doesn't do a very good job of watching his own flock, if it was sheep, oxen, if we're talking about oxen here, donkeys, whatever. His livestock, he was not watching his livestock very well. And that livestock could be oxen, donkeys, cows, sheep, whatever it is. He wasn't watching it very well. So when his animals decided to go astray and went into, let's say we got person A has these animals, and person A's animals now go into person B's land and start grazing without permission. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed by his own animals, and lets loose his animal, in other words, he wasn't tending to it very well, he just let it go wherever he wanted, or sometimes he just deliberately let his animals go because he didn't have enough in his field to feed his own animals. He didn't tend to his field very well, his animals had nothing to eat, so he went and set them in the neighbor's field so that his animals could still eat. And he didn't ask his neighbor if he could do it. And if the animal feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution, the thief shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. Okay? Let me tell you something. When person A's animals entered person B's field, what was happening was that person A's animals was actually eating the food that would have gone to person B and his family, or the food that would have gone to person B's animals. So now his animals are starving to death. And we're talking about vineyards here. Hey, everybody likes a good drink. So now person A's animals are eating the fruits, even the grapes, of person B. And if person B was pretty good at making wine, he had now no way to make the wine he wanted to make. Well, that wasn't right. So person A would have to surrender whatever was in his field, which was the best of his field, to person B. That means that person A and his family could literally starve to death because of person A's stupidity or just downright gluttony or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Let's say person A builds a bonfire carelessly, and the embers of that bonfire fly from person A's field to person B's field and ignites it. Says, if a fire breaks out and catches in thorns so that stacked grain, standing grain, or the field is consumed, he who kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. Now, I'm not really sure what they mean by about stacked grain or standing grain. I would probably say it's probably grain that actually has been harvested. Okay. And, okay, I would say probably that stacked grain would probably be stuff that's been already harvested, and standing grain would probably be grain that's still in the field. I'm thinking that. And if the field itself has been consumed, well, That's pretty bad. That means those people could starve to death. So, person B would have to live off of what person A has. And if person A don't have very much, that could be bad. Alright. So, as you can see, in Exodus 21 and 22, you're dealing with the scum of the earth. How could you stand there and let your animals graze on another person's field, knowing that that other person, him and his family and his animals, would starve because of what you did, what you allowed to happen? That's pretty scummy. And that's what God was talking about. So, I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.